let's see what we can do about reading through Tim Hagg's notes here. This is starting in looking at Matthew 24, starting at verse 40 and 41, which Tim has reproduced for us in his commentary on Matthew, which again is available at his website at TorahResource.com. Then there will be two men in the field, one will be taken, one will be left. Two women will be grinding at the mill, one will be taken, one will be left. All right, here's what Tim has to say. These two verses are in perfect parallelism with each other and supply additional illustrations of, one, the way in which the judgment that comes at the parousia will be unexpected as seen by, two, the manner in which people will be going about their daily business without concern at all for what the future holds. Remember, I also talked about the fact that there will be two people groups when Yeshua comes back, people who are unaware, the unbelieving world at large, and then there will be the church who is not, and I don't mean the professing church, I mean the genuine, true, the faithful church, who truly are ready to meet their Lord and Savior. We who are of those who have the Holy Spirit inside of us and are therefore being prepped for the return. So we're aware of the signs and things like that. Tim Hagg is going to kind of talk about these pairs of groups as well. And that's what he's trying to say, is that the two will be walking in the field, one will be taken, one will be left. He's trying to say that the force of Yeshua's words are that he's describing the two people groups that will be alive during the time period of Yeshua's second coming. So the manner in which people will be going about their daily business without concern for all of what the future holds. Those are the unbelieving world, the tares in Yeshua's Matthew 13 parable. The two illustrations encompass both genders, and in each case the pair are doing the same thing. Yet external similarities are stripped away by God's judgment. He continues by reminding us that in Luke's parallel, which is found in 1734-36, it has in some manuscripts three doublets, right? Adding one in verse 34 to Matthew's 2, which is, I tell you that on that night there will be two in one bed, one will be taken, the other will be left. He remarks that the addition of the word men, the two in one bed, in the KJV and ASV 1901 version of your English translations is unnecessary and not represented in the Greek, the word men there, which simply has literally asantai duo epi kleines mias. There will be two upon one bed or one couch, is what the Greek is trying to say there. He continues, there's therefore no need to suppose that Matthew left this third illustration out because it was thought to incorporate a homosexual relationship in which case both would fall under judgment, right? Where he says two men in one bed. So don't get confused. It's just two in one bed. The word men isn't even in the Greek. If Luke's third example is taken at face value, it may describe two people sitting on a couch, since kline can describe a bed, a cot, or a couch, or a couple sleeping in a bed. It is to the latter if it is the latter, then we have in Luke's third example mixed genders as opposed to two women, or two men and two women in the other scenarios. So let's keep reading Tim Hagg. He says, why is one taken and the other left? We're not told immediately, but the larger context makes it clear that one was prepared and one was not. Now, I need you to follow along with me. Don't get lost. We're talking about who is taken and who's left. And Tim Hagg is not directly telling us when this event takes place. He's not saying that it is at rapture or it is at second coming, but he's going to indicate later on, and I do believe, even if he doesn't say it directly, I believe he's indicating that it's rapture, and therefore the language owes to what Tim Hagg is he and I are going to agree that it is at rapture that the believers are taken, and it's during, and the wicked are left behind, and he's not even going to deal with what happens at the second coming. So again, it's this chart right here that Tim Hagg, I believe, is going to describe. I read through this a few times because it was a little bit confusing to me, but I believe this is what Tim Hagg is going to describe. So just look at the screen for a second again. Rapture, Christians are taken, wicked are left. Second coming, wicked are taken, Christians are left. So with that in mind, let's read keep reading Tim. Why is one taken, the other left? We're not told immediately. but the larger context makes it clear that one's prepared and one is not. But how are we to decide whether judgment is pictured as coming upon one taken or one left? Remember, Pastor Ice that we read about says that the time frame in reference in Matthew 24 is not rapture, it is second coming, and therefore the one taken is the one taken in judgment, and the one left behind is the one left behind to inherit the kingdom. But Tim says, how can we decide this? He says a number of factors may aid us in this decision. Number one, the previous verses in Matthew 24, 37 through 39, focus attention upon the flood as a prototype of the eschatological judgment. Those who are left upon the earth, i.e. not taken into the ark, perish in the flood. And the verb to take, as I already pointed out in verse 39 of Matthew 24, where we have the flood came and took them all away, is a different verb, right? A form of the verb airo in the Greek, than the one used in the following verse, the very next few verses, which is verse 40 and 41, which is paralambano. And that was a significant difference that I myself pointed out already. The Pastor Ice also pointed out, but he sees it not the way that Tim Hegg and I are seeing it. So I want you to understand that Tim Hegg and I are in agreement in this aspect, looking at these two verbs and seeing the way that they're used in the passage to describe who's taken and who's left. Tim Hegg says that Noah and his family rise above the floodwaters in the ark and are therefore saved from the destruction because the ark preserved them from the destruction waters. So that's part of his explanation of why he believes that, excuse me, why he believes that taken in Matthew 24, 37 through 41, the word taken, when it talks about the flood came and took them all away, and then two will be in the field, one will be taken, one will be left. Tim Hegg believes that the Christians are the ones, the Christians are the ones, the believers will be taken, meaning the two that are walking in the field. Christians will be taken and the unbelievers will be left behind. He goes on to say in second of all, why he holds this perspective is he's looking at the context. The verb translated left, which is aphiemi, in verse 40 and 41, is often used by Matthew in the sense of abandoned or forsaken, right? In other words, follow from Matthew 4:20, 22, Matthew 5:24, Matthew 8:22, Matthew 19:29, 23:38, and 26:56. So that's another reason why the context leads Tim to believe that Matthew is referring to believers that are taken in rapture or taken by as in rescued, and the left behind are those who are abandoned or forsaken. Number three, Tim Hegg says the verb translated take, which is paralambano, in these verses, right, when it talks about two will be walking and one will be taken, one will be left. This verb, which was picked up by the Pastor Ice, but used in a different way, is often, or used it for the different time frame, is often used by Matthew in a positive, this is Tim Hegg's words, in a positive rather than a negative sense. Thus, Yeshua takes Peter, James, and John to the Mount of Transfiguration in Matthew 17 and also Matthew 20. Likewise, Joseph and Mary are warned to take the infant Yeshua to Egypt and also to take him back to Israel when the danger was passed in Matthew 2 and verses following there. Indeed, Tim says the primary sense of paralambano is to take along or to bring someone along, right? Remember, it's made up of two words, and I'll just show you them here on my screen since I've got it pulled up. Here we go. This is Strong's number 3880, paralambano, to receive from, and to take from, to receive from, to take to receive, to acknowledge, to admit, to take with me. And when we look at the help word studies where it shows how the word is broken down into its two parts, the first part of the phrase paralambano is from a Greek word para, 3844, which means close alongside of. And the second half of it, lambano, Strong's number 2983, is to aggressively take. So it means to take alongside of someone aggressively, or to personally take someone, to closely bring them alongside you, even aggressively if need be. as in the sense of in the rapture, rescuing someone, snatching them away suddenly because there's danger, immediate danger to the person, and you don't have time to explain to them why you need to take them away. You just snatch them out of the harm's way. Well, this is what Tim Hegg's trying to emphasize to take alongside, to bring along. The BDAG has as the first meaning, this is a very well-known and well-trusted lexicon that he refers to, the BDAG. It has as the first meaning to take into close association. And then the fourth point in his logical flow, using his explaining why he believes this is that the taken are those who are taken in rapture, and the left behind are those who are left behind to be destroyed or to face punishment. He says, point number 4, it may well be that Paul's teaching about the believers meeting Yeshua in the air in Thessalonians was based upon his knowledge of Yeshua's teaching as found in the gospel accounts, that the angels gather the elect from one end of the sky to the other in Matthew 24:31 seems to parallel Paul's words that the believers would, quote, meet him in the air. And when I look at this particular chart here, it's a good time as any to show you this chart. We'll revisit it when we talk about rapture later on. But in Matthew 24's account of the details that we've already been studying, and we parallel that with 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, particularly verses 16 and 17, we can see that there's a one-to-one parallel, just like we already saw with Matthew and Revelation chapter 6. We also see these parallels in Paul's writing to the church at Thessalonica. We have what? In the reading from top to bottom, I'll just read right down the middle. We have the context, which is the parousia. We have the surviving believers being delivered. Then we have the initiation of the parousia. So the surviving believers is what we might call the rapture there. The initiation of the parousia is described by Paul, which corresponds one-to-one with what Yeshua described. Then we have the universal perception where everyone's seeing what's going on, right? What I talked about, the opposite of a secret rapture, of a very loudly announced rapture, second coming. Then we have the Jesus coming with the clouds, which in Matthew and in Paul were previously given by Daniel in Daniel chapter 7, where the Son of Man approaches the Ancient of Days riding on the clouds, coming with the clouds, is what Daniel says. I'll flash a little screen grab and post to show you that reference from Daniel. Then we've got the angelic presence, right? The angels are participating in this event that shows up in Matthew, it shows up in Paul, and it shows up in Revelation as well. The parallels continue with the trumpet call in Matthew, which is echoed by Paul, and then lastly we've got the gathering itself, which is the phrase that that Tim Hegg's highlighting right now when he says the gathering. So going back to Tim and concluding, so we've got the angels gathering the elect from one end of the sky to the other. This gathering that Tim talks about is clearly rapture language that cannot be ignored, even if you take the post-trib position where rapture and second coming are kind of right on top of one another. You still have to allow for the idea that there's this gathering and then there's this return, or this gathering for we go to meet Yeshua. That still has to take place. We can't get away from that. Even messianics who are kind of rejecting secret rapture, and in the end, in their effort to reject secret rapture, they end up rejecting rapture altogether. They still have to acknowledge that both Yeshua and Paul talk about a gathering, which was not shown in Daniel. The gathering part is part of the mystery that was hidden from the Tanakh crowd, from the prophets. The idea that we are going to be gathered as living group to be with Yeshua. In 1 Corinthians 15:51, and I'll show this in post as well, Paul unambiguously says, behold, I show you a mystery. I tell you a mystery. And I'm kind of paraphrasing, but you're seeing it on the screen if you're looking at this video now in YouTube. Behold, I tell you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed, right? In a moment, in the twinkling of an eye. This catching away to be with the Lord, that we who are alive, kind of switching over to the Thessalonians passage now, we who are alive will be caught up to meet the Lord in the air. I think he says that both in Corinthians and in Thessalonians, but particularly I'm just showing that Tim Hegg highlights this catching up, or this gathering, a language that was already given by Yeshua in Matthew 24:31, which is picked up by Paul in 1 Thessalonians 4 4:17. We meet Yeshua in the air as believers, and we meet also those who are raised from the dead. And continuing with Tim, and we'll finish this tonight, this is just its last piece. These data give weight to the view that, you ready for it? Those who are taken are not the ones who are taken in judgment. Tim says they are the ones who are rescued, and those who are left face the wrath and the judgment of God. So I'm reading, see if I can highlight it. I'm reading this part right here. This is the part that agrees with what my perspective is as well. Those who are taken at the time of the rapture, I'm adding that part, at the time of rapture, and I don't know if Tim Hegg, again, if he agrees with pre-wrath rapture or not. I don't know for certain that he does. If he's like many messianic folks out there, he's not fond of any rapture language that would put us either pre-trib or even pre-wrath, pre-trib, or mid-trib, anything like that. He's more, if he's like many messianics, he's more closely aligned with post-trib, if I'm correct. But he definitely does believe that those who are taken are the ones who are rescued at the time of the writing of this commentary, and those who are left would face the wrath of the judgment of God. He continues, this interpretation not only fits well with the references to Noah that begin the paragraph in Matthew, but also with the story of Lot and his family being rescued out of Sodom, which Luke includes in his synoptic parallel to our text. You can find it in Luke 17:28. For the story itself in Genesis 19:15, Lot and his family, and he reminds us now, they were physically brought out of Sodom by the two angels, right? And we have a quote here from the Genesis passage. He, Lot, hesitated. Moses wrote this. So the men seized his hand and the hand of his wife and the hands of his two daughters, for the compassion of the Lord was upon him. And they did what? They brought him out and put him outside the city. And then if you remember reading the rest of the story in Genesis, it is only after rescuing Lot and his family that fire and brimstone rained down from the Lord out of heaven onto Sodom and Gomorrah and destroy it. So in the sequence of the story that Tim Hegg's reminding us about, the sequence is that the righteous, represented by Lot and his family, the righteous are taken out of the way of harm's way first, and then destruction befalls those who are, ready for this, left behind in the path of destruction. So let's read Tim Hegg's notes, and then I'll put my my final concluding commentary on top of what Tim Hegg has to say. We're reading this part right here. Thus, Tim says, to be taken means to be rescued, and to be left means to perish in the coming destruction. But the primary point of the two illustrations given in Matthew retelling is that one must be prepared for the return of Messiah. And what does it mean to be prepared? It means being engaged in faithful service to the one who is coming, and thus demonstrating one's trust and faith in his ability to save and rescue from judgment. When the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on the earth? A quote from Luke 18:18. And that's the point where we leave off with Tim Hegg. So putting my closing comments on it and our conclusion to tonight's study, what we looked at intensely is at this idea of when will this time take place? Is it rapture or is it second coming? According to many pre-tribbers, this event is that's described in Matthew chapter 24, verse, starting probably all the way back as far as 30 and reading through around verse 44 or something like that. Let me pull up the passage. You can see it on your screen. Basically, it's Matthew 24, starting with maybe verse 29, where Yeshua talks about the sun being dark and the moon not giving its light. And then he talks about the Son of Man coming on the clouds of the sky with a great trumpet blast, the angels gathering together. Many Christians would see this as the second coming and not the rapture. And the reason many pre-tribbers have to hold to this, as I kind of interject and kind of tipping my hand towards what we're going to be talking about in section 10, 11, and 12 when we talk about rapture, the reason why many pre-tribbers have to say that this is referring to second coming and not rapture is because clearly Yeshua says immediately after the tribulation of those days, and then he describes this gathering together? Well, pre-tribbers clearly don't believe that they're going to have to go through any tribulation. They believe that Jesus is going to rescue them from that, and therefore the secret rapture that takes place is not after the tribulation. The secret rapture that takes place is prior to the tribulation, right? So when Jesus says in verse 29, immediately after the tribulation, it's unmistakable that he's describing an event that is after the tribulation. And if according to pre-trib, it's a 7-year tribulation, then the events described in verse 31 is, and the 30 and 31 is clearly the second coming. And so with that, when Yeshua talks about in the lower section that we have in my screen right now in blue, that 2 will be taken and 1 will be left, it's clearly the second coming. And so from that, the pre-tribbers would determine that those who are taken cannot be the church because the church was already raptured. Therefore, the taken must refer to the wicked, and the left behind must refer to the righteous who come back with Yeshua on white horses to populate the millennial kingdom, the kingdom of righteousness. But Tim Hegg says, no, taken must be rescued and left behind must be perishing in the destruction. And again, he's not saying that he's a pre-wrather like I am. He's simply saying that the language that Yeshua is talking about in this part of Matthew must be referring to a rapture and thus referring to those who are taken as those who are taken in rapture, those who are rescued, just like Lot was rescued first and then destruction poured down, just like the ark. Noah and his family got onto the ark first, and they were, in that sense, when they got onto the ark, they were rescued from harm's way, and then the flood came down chronologically and washed away all of the unrighteous people who didn't listen to Noah. So the point that I'm trying to highlight, and then I'm closing with this, is that whether you take taken or left behind in one sense or the other, what is unmistakable is that there are 2 people groups, and that in the overarching sense of the final eschaton, which matches the days of Noah that Yeshua talked about in Matthew 24. In the Matthew passage, Yeshua clearly says that what takes place at the end of the age will mirror what took place in the days of Noah. And here's the takeaway. Here's the primary part that we have to grasp, or we're going to lose the force of what Yeshua is trying to say. There are 2 people groups, and one is destined for judgment, and one is destined for rescue. And in the Noah passage, where the people were, the judgment fell. They were left behind to face that judgment that for Noah and his family were rescued away from. Where the destruction was, that's where the people were. That's the point I'm trying to bring up, okay? Noah and his family were lifted away and floated away to safety. But the people were synonymous with where the judgment befell. So the location of the judgment is where the people were. That's the point I'm trying to highlight, is where the people were, the judgment were, and where the judgment was, the people were. That's the point I'm trying to highlight. Same thing with Lot. He and his family were rescued by the angels and taken away from the area of destruction. By comparison, the wicked inhabitants of Sodom and Gomorrah were left behind so that where the judgment was, those people were. You following along with me? The location of the judgment is synonymous with where the people would be. So in Yeshua's description of that life on planet Earth when he returns will be similar, the point is that in the rapture model where we are taken away and snatched up into the air, we are not what John is going to describe as the earth dwellers. The earth dwellers are the place where the people are, and, are you ready for this? It's the place where the judgment falls. When God's wrath is poured out, even when the wrath of Satan is poured out, it's on earth. But where are the believers? We are not on earth. We're in the air, right? We've met the Lord in the air, and we're to ever be with the Lord, according to Paul's terminology in the Thessalonian letter. So we're not the earth dwellers. We're not where the judgment is going to be poured out. No matter how you take the taken or the left behind, you have to agree that where the judgment falls is where the wicked are. The judgment and the wicked are synonymous with one another in location. So the to say that the wicked are taken out of the way must mean that the judgment is not in view, meaning because the judgment, it falls on people who are left there to face the judgment. They are the ones who are not taken out. They're not taken out of harm's way. So when we get to Revelation, this is clearly borne out by the fact that Satan comes down to earth with great wrath in Revelation chapter 12, and that the judgments that are poured out, starting in Revelation chapter 7 with the breaking of the seventh seal by Yeshua, the Lamb, the judgments that are poured out are clearly poured out where? On the earth dwellers, on those who dwell on the earth. So that's an important point that we're going to have to recognize, and we'll certainly seize on that when the time comes for us to look at that in the book of Revelation. But that'll do it for eschatology, eschatology, a biblical study of end time events, with this look at taken and left behind.